Well, thank you for being with us for the start of the second half, hour 13. This is another reason for hope. Clean energy is not just good for the environment, it's also an invaluable resource for hundreds of millions of people around the world who completely lack access to reliable energy resources today. In the nation of India alone, 400 million people have no electricity at all. Now, those of us who live in wealthy, developed nations who relied for so long on fossil fuels to build these giant, robust economies, unlike that, in developing nations, they now have the opportunity to leapfrog the destructive nature of the old, dirty fossil fuels and go straight to building a healthy economy without destroying their environment in the process. So the 13th reason for hope is that renewable energy is also building economic growth, reducing global poverty, and expanding access to energy. As you just heard, this whole series of hours, these next few hours, are focused on the collateral and crucial collateral benefits of embracing the renewable energy revolution, reducing carbon pollution, saving money, and in the process, reducing poverty and giving people access to energy who never had access to energy in the past. Here's an example. Today, on a global basis, 1.3 billion people lack access to electricity, and 2.6 billion people do not have clean cooking facilities. As you may have seen one of our field reports that told the very powerful story about the incredibly dangerous health consequences that come when people rely on these very dirty cook stoves inside, creating indoor air pollution and lung diseases and premature death, and children under the age of 5 are the ones that are the most vulnerable. Well, the new kinds of efficient cook stoves and renewable energy technologies can also improve their health and lift them out of poverty at the same time. It's a very exciting benefit of this. So here are people reading by candlelight, and this illustrates that 90% of the new energy demand in the world is gonna come from poor developing nations. They have the most to gain, they have the most to lose from the climate crisis, and they have the most to gain from solving the climate crisis by quickly embracing clean, renewable technologies. So the Sierra Club put it very well when they pointed out that the poorest people in the world at present pay on average 40 times as much for the same amount of energy services, but in return, they get very poor outcomes, poor lighting, they get poor health outcomes, for example, from these dirty cook stoves. So these individuals have a tremendous amount to gain from the solutions we're talking about. Solar lanterns are improving lives in underdeveloped areas in a very, very big way. It's quite exciting. This is a marketplace in a rural community in the developing world where this marketplace could not have existed at this time of day before the solar lanterns, at least not in the same way. But this is a very tangible illustration of how economic activity and commerce and extra income for farmers and merchants in the developing world can be enhanced by something as simple as a solar lantern. This is another example. A shopkeeper who is able to expand her business and make a little bit more money with the use of solar lanterns. And what this points out is that more than 95% of the people in the world who presently lack access to electricity are either in sub-Saharan Africa or in the developing areas of Asia, and most of them in rural areas. So the Center for American Progress put out a really insightful report last spring on reducing poverty through the actions that are needed to solve the climate crisis. I recommend their work to you. And one of the things they wrote is that achieving universal access to reliable, affordable, convenient, and safe energy is actually critical in order to make possible the sustainable economic growth in these areas and crucial to improving the livelihoods and well-beings of poor people in the world. So solving the climate crisis is central to reducing poverty around the world. There have been some communities of NGOs and activists in the past who used to think of these two challenges as somehow separate. In fact, they are the very same challenge. They need to be approached and addressed in the same way at the same time. This is one of my favorite slides. I showed this slide as part of a long slideshow recently in a developing country with poor children, poor families, and the mothers in the audience immediately reacted to this slide, and you can guess why. Their children don't have access to the world of knowledge available now digitally to most people in the world. And here is something they instantly recognized as a solution to that problem. This is in Sierra Leone, by the way, which in many years is sometimes ranked as the poorest country in the world. I'm not sure it's right at the bottom now, but there's a lot of problems. And here you have these children with the so-called $100 laptop that my great friend Nick Negroponte has organized to provide to poor children around the world, a laptop for every child, and they are getting the electricity from these photovoltaic solar panels. The excitement among these mothers that I described who were listening to and watching the slideshow was really, it took me by surprise until I just thought a half a second about it. And yeah, they want a better future for their children, and this demonstrates that this is a tool. Renewable energy is part of the way we can lift the next generation out of poverty and give them a more sustainable future. Here's another favorite slide of mine. This is in Africa. It is in South Sudan, a village that has never had electricity, ever. But now, with the new solar photovoltaic panel technology, this hut can have a supply of electricity. Now, there's an important collateral lesson that people have been learning when they take this technology to villages like this one in South Sudan. They are adopting new business models. They, in this case, are using what's called pay-as-you-go solar power. With low initial costs, the small systems are affordable on a pay-as-you-go basis. I have a friend who sells these systems in India, and he was telling me of a conversation he had with a woman, head of household in a rural village in India that had never had electricity, and he was trying to convince her this was in her best interest. And she said no and shook her head and said 30 rupees a month is too much. And he said, well, what about 1 rupee per day? And she said, okay, I can do that. Well, she knows that there are 30 days in a month. She's not oblivious to that. But what she also knows is that she can do without electricity some days or many hours of some days. And if she uses this pay-as-you-go model and pays for it only when she uses it, then her children can also gain access to the world of digital knowledge now available to children. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if the Khan Academy wasn't holding forth at some point inside this hut. Or for older people, a Coursera or one of the MOOCs. Maybe I'm getting a little too far out there on this, but something very like that is happening in these villages and in these households where children who've never had access to the world of knowledge all of a sudden do now have access to it. This is in Peru, where the government itself is providing free solar photovoltaic systems to more than 2 million of the poorest residents in Peru. By the way, Peru in Lima will be host to a very important negotiating session in December of this year, because after the UN summit special session and summit meeting for heads of state on Tuesday, then the next step in this international process will be in Peru in December. Then the national commitments will be made public in March of next year. Then there will be another intermediate negotiation, and then on the road to Paris, where in December of 2015, that is when this process will culminate. Now, the World Bank president, Jim Yong Kim, who is doing a fantastic job, really fantastic. I was bragging on him earlier. He points out, having made climate one of his top priorities, that the World Bank's agenda to end poverty could be threatened and could be reversed without action to solve the climate crisis. And he says, and this is an institution whose primary mandate is to end poverty, he says we can't do it unless we take serious steps to protect our planet. Now, before I close this part of Hour 13, I want to point out again that the global subsidies for dirty fossil fuels are up to 25 times larger than the meager subsidies for renewable energy technologies. But countries that have had big subsidies, some of them are beginning to phase them out, including Indonesia, India, China, and Russia. And at the last G20 leaders meeting in St. Petersburg, the leaders reaffirmed a commitment to phase out these subsidies for fossil fuels. So the decision to support renewables, phase out subsidies for fossil fuels, is not only a step towards solving the climate crisis and improving health and improving livelihoods, but helping to end poverty and to expand access to energy for hundreds of millions of people who have never had it. And that 13th reason is a reason for hope.